We've already hosted Dr. Sid Warrier on the Ranveer Show, where he highlighted the positive aspects of neuroscience. How do you hack your own brain for productivity, etc., etc. This particular episode was deeper because we spoke about the dark aspects of neuroscience. And trust me, there are many dark aspects. As you age, as you go through experiences in life, your brain is constantly being molded into different versions of itself. That's what we've highlighted. What's going to happen to you going forward? Are you going to encounter any kind of brain problems? What can you do to prevent those brain problems? What am I going through personally? What's Dr. Sid going through personally? What's the world going through personally? If you enjoyed the movie Shutter Island, I think you're going to enjoy this particular episode of The Ranveer Show. Remember to follow The Ranveer Show on Spotify. We're a Spotify exclusive now. Every episode's available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. Ever since I saw Shutter Island, I always wanted to create a podcast on insanity. This is that podcast, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed learning from Dr. Sid Warrier. Enjoy yourselves. Dr. Sid Warrior, welcome back to the Ranveer Show, brother.
Thank you, man.
Dr. Sid, that's a nice gimmick to kind of put out there. The first episode we did honestly blew my mind. Like, it was just crazy, but we spoke about everything from a very good boy, good girl perspective. That this is how you live your life. And I feel like, especially when it comes to neuroscience, there's a whole dark side where I know that modern day neuroscience, and I spoke to Dr. Balan Jalal about this on this show. Modern day neuroscience, of course, we're exploring lots of different aspects of the brain, but something that's come to the forefront is a study about psychedelics like ayahuasca, peyote, shrooms, etc. The second is things like Neuralink, devices that we're putting into our heads that are simulating maybe drug experiences, maybe pleasure without actually us inducing those drugs and pleasures. Also, Neuralink fixes, the basic purpose of Neuralink being created is to fix certain aspects that go wrong with the brain. And what would you say is a third kind of area of interest? Would you say understanding psychosis more, or understanding dementia more, Alzheimer's more, these things?
So, in our understanding of the brain, the doorway into understanding initially has been disease. You don't know what one part of the brain does until something has gone wrong with it. So some of the classic cases was there was a patient called Phineas Gage who had a rod go through his brain, and it only injured one part of his frontal lobe, and everything else was fine. He was able to walk around, look around, but his personality changed entirely. So that's when they realized that, oh, your frontal lobe is responsible for your personality. Because till then, how would you know?
What happened to his personality?
He was behaving erratically. He was forgetting things. There was another case where, have you seen this movie 50 First Dates?
Yeah.
So that happens when certain parts of your brain get damaged. You keep forgetting. You are only able to retain a memory for some time. So all our initial understanding of the brain came from diseases, so something going wrong with the brain.
I'd also like to highlight an anecdote. Basically, I heard that especially the field of neuroscience evolved a lot after World War I. And this is because a lot of soldiers were using a new kind of rifle, which was new for that period of history. So basically, the guns before World War I, the way those guns were built was that if I shoot a bullet into your head right now, it will not leave your head, but it will go in your head and kind of explode out from the other side. So when it leaves your head from behind, it'll be like one big explosion of blood and brains and all. But in World War I, the guns that were used had faster bullets which could just go through your head and come out through a hole on the other side. Now,
so there was more surgical precision bullets.
So if you hit someone straight in the middle of the brain, they're dead. But say you miss hitting the center of the brain and you only hit a part of the brain. So the bullet's gone from one end and leaves your brain from the other end. Then it's just kind of cut off a part of your brain. So after World War I, the world of neuroscience figured that if a bullet has entered this side of the brain and the guy is alive, but he can't speak now, then therefore this part of the brain was probably responsible for speech. It's entered this side and now he can't see. So probably this part of the brain is responsible for eyesight.
Exactly.
World War One basically helped neuroscience a lot in a very morbid way. So you had guys with holes in their head who were still alive, and through studying their behaviors, you learned more about the brain.
Most of our knowledge comes from mistakes or accidents initially, because we don't have that capacity to run experiments at that time. The next big breakthrough happened through psychedelics,
Okay.
ironically.
Which is when?
Because around in the early part of 19th century, 20th century, 1915, 20, that was the time when a lot of the psychedelic drugs were discovered. LSD was one of the major breakthroughs. The guy who discovered it, I think he was German or Swiss, and he was working for a petrol company, I believe, and he was just running experiments on different drugs. And one day he was cycling home, and he found he was tripping. He had no idea why, but because he was a scientist, he came home and he wrote down everything that he was going through, and he figured out that he was experimenting with 4-5 drugs on that day, and one of them must have slipped in through his finger skin and gotten absorbed in the blood. And that is when they discovered LSD. And they found out that LSD was the strongest psychedelic at that time, because a 0.02 milligram could send you on a trip. And then they ran experiments more, and that is how they found out this whole system in the body called as serotonin. Before that, they didn't even know that there was something called serotonin. And now serotonin is the major drug. It's the major hormone. All your depression, anxiety, everything is managed by serotonin. So the whole serotonin network, our knowledge of that, we owe to LSD.
I think in the last episode, dopamine was the hero of the episode. We spoke about how success and all that is related to dopamine. But how is serotonin also controlling anxiety and these things?
Serotonin, the whole serotonin network it's very complex, but to put it in a very simple way, serotonin controls dopamine. So when you talk of impulsiveness, serotonin allows you to be calmer. Serotonin allows you to take a step back, value things. How important is this thing to you? Do you really need to do this action? Should you say this? Dopamine says, go for it. You'll get a kick out of it, just do it. Serotonin says, ruk, soch. So if your serotonin and dopamine levels are on balance, you are a balanced person. If your serotonin levels are low, you will be more and more impulsive. It's crazy how personality types actually boil down to just levels of hormones. So if there is an impulse buyer, for example, so if you find yourself going on Amazon just to browse and you find something you like, do you add to cart? Do you buy now? Decided by both of them will give you dopamine, but serotonin will decide, are you able to put it off for later, or will you go for it just now?
Is it like the body's way of, you said that if the serotonin levels are low, it means you're impulsive.
Yeah.
So is that impulse a form of trying to raise your serotonin levels, because serotonin is a feel-good hormone?
No, serotonin itself is not a feel-good hormone. Serotonin is I like to think of it as a balancing hormone. Dopamine is the feel-good hormone. But serotonin controls the dopamine levels, because the problem with dopamine is, as soon as it goes high, it goes down also that rapidly.
What people need to understand about the hormonal system is that the secretion of one hormone is usually dependent on another hormone.
Think of it like 5-6 seesaws in your brain, all of them controlling each other. So if serotonin goes down, dopamine goes up, serotonin goes up, dopamine comes down. But these are not the only seesaws. There are some 7 or 8 different neurochemicals, all of them controlling each other. So when you say you have to be a balanced person, you're actually saying all your neural chemicals have to be in balance. The dark side of serotonin is that if your serotonin levels are low and you are feeling impulsive, what if you feel impulsive towards a negative thing?
Killing someone.
Killing yourself. So they did studies on people who have attempted suicide, and they found that the serotonin levels in their body was low. They studied their cerebrospinal fluid, which is the fluid in the brain, and they checked for serotonin molecules, and they found it was too low. Also part of depression. So in depression also serotonin levels are low, which is why serotonin replacement is one of the cornerstones of depression therapy.
Let's talk about the moment of suicide, the moment of doing something dark and impulsive like this. It could even apply to things like molestation, rape. between the moment you choose to kill someone or yourself, or you choose to do a wrong thing, and the moment that you actually go about doing it, there's a phase of contemplation and debate. So you're saying that if the serotonin levels are lower than usual, that phase where you're contemplating, where you're trying to equate things, where you're thinking of the outcome of your actions,
Yeah.
that phase is very short for people who are impulsive.
Yeah.
So will serotonin reduce the amount of contemplation you'll do about your outcomes? Will you just think of the action?
Think of it this way. Serotonin empowers certain parts of your brain more. So they are in the picture. We have multiple levels of action. So when you say that I did something, that is oversimplifying it. So if somebody lights your foot on fire, or if you just step on something sharp, your foot goes back even before you are aware that your foot was on fire. So that is a spinal reflex. That decision is made by your spinal cord. It didn't even come up to your brain. And every few levels, there is another center of decision making. So think of it like a corporate company. The CEO doesn't get involved in every decision. So the lower level people will only make a lot of decisions, and the complexity of the decision goes on increasing, and you get involved more and more. Something like self-harm, the CEO has the job of saying no, vetoing it, because it is the limbic system that does those impulsive things. This will feel good, let me do it. Or forget it, there's no hope anymore, let me end it. The CEO has the job of vetoing it, that don't.
Putting logic into
it. Because there is something called as a frontopolar area. As per the name, it is the pole of your frontal lobe. So absolutely at the tip. This area is the one responsible for visualizing the future. So when you get asked a question in the HR meeting, say like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? That frontopolar area has the job of visualizing the future.
Or manifestation.
And right behind that is an area called ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Name is complex. This is where serotonin works maximum. And this area has the job of valuing things.
Your present. Focusing on your present.
Yes. How important is this for you? Now put these two areas together. You visualize yourself in this space in 5 years. How important is that for you? Put them together and you have hope. You have having a positive outlook towards life. You are optimistic. You don't have serotonin. Whatever is your visualization, if you don't have value, that visualization has no meaning for you. Now you have a negative outlook towards life.
Your future and your present are tied in the same way that tip of your brain which decides the future and the part behind that which decides the present are tied.
They are tied. So when you don't have serotonin, whatever you visualize will appear bleak.
Which is why they say success begins in the mind. If you want to get somewhere in life, first you have to believe that yes, I will be able to, because right now I have this kind of a skill set. And it's honestly a spiritual tool. I personally used to overcome self-doubt. I dealt with a lot of self-doubt battles up to the point where I realized, hold on, if I've spent 4 years on the internet constantly growing, what stops me from growing for the next 40 years?
Right.
If my trajectory was upwards. Equated the present, said, I'll be able to get there. And every year after that has been better. I had one bad year, which was still an upward growth year.
Right.
But it wasn't as crazy growth as before, because I was trying to do 2 businesses instead of just BeerBiceps.
Right.
But once that second business got stable, Monk Entertainment, I was able to put all my energy back into BeerBiceps and then continue growing on like that upward trajectory.
It is very easy to dismiss manifestation or positive thinking, the power of positive thinking. But at a biological level, you need to think positively for the rest of your brain to follow. It is just like a corporate. If your CEO is a negative person, that startup will not run. It is just logic. Ask any CEO, and at their group meetings, if they don't paint a positive picture, it's not going to work. So your prefrontal cortex is the CEO. You have to be positive so that the rest of your brain follows.
Wow, man. Why is serotonin secreted when you're cuddling or when you are around your family or around your dog? Why is serotonin linked to that? Is it this sort of phenomena of you starting to appreciate the present, that these are my blessings, these are my gifts? So does serotonin levels increase because of that? And is that why they say that work-life balance is important? Because when you start enjoying your weekend, when you start enjoying your family time, you bring back a certain energy to your work. Is this the biology behind it?
There is one more hormone, since you brought up family, which is called oxytocin. And oxytocin was initially thought of as only important for women to give birth. That was what the initial idea was. Now you know that oxytocin is important both in men and women, in all genders, and the idea of oxytocin is bonding.
A human to human connection.
Human to human connection.
Or human to dog, or human to
anything. You could even have oxytocin release when you see a favorite picture of yours. It is that, but it is more for living to living being. So even when you look at the picture of a cute puppy, that feeling of awe that you get is that puppy tricking your brain into releasing oxytocin.
So it's like your brain ejaculates with an awe.
So exactly, it's your orgasm. So
anyway, go on.
So
And
that is
oxytocin and serotonin are linked?
they are all linked.
Like how you said, the system of the seesaws.
Exactly. Just like how dopamine and serotonin is linked, dopamine and oxytocin is linked, oxytocin and serotonin is linked. We haven't even talked of testosterone, but all of these hormones keep each other in balance. So when you are spending time with your family, oxytocin is released, that increases the level of bonding. And one important role oxytocin has is it reduces your amygdala activation.
Which is your center of fear.
Stressor, yes. So the more oxytocin you have going on, the less stressed you are because your bonding is there.
What does oxytocin do to serotonin?
So those are actually independent networks that connect at a couple of places. They are synergistic. So it is not like dopamine and serotonin that one goes up, one goes down. So serotonin has the role of figuring out how much you value this person. So who you are cuddling with matters.
Like as an emotional bond rather than just physical.
Yeah. That, I mean, we should be careful of not oversimplifying things.
Okay.
But the basic idea is, what are you giving your value towards? That is what roughly serotonin network is responsible for.
In my world, especially when I'm talking to my co-founders or my inner circle, I keep referring to putting my consciousness on things. So say if there are 4 startups, I consciously pull out my consciousness out of 2 of them in phases. And I say that right now I'm just going to focus on BeerBiceps and level.
Sure.
Is that what is related to serotonin? Like this is what matters to me in my present?
That word matters is serotonin.
Okay.
That you are giving value to something. What the other thing you already said about consciousness, that is your attention network.
Which I'm sure is linked to serotonin in some way.
It is, of course, but it is more of dopamine. So attention is linked very closely to dopamine because that is what decides, should you pay attention to what you're saying? Should I pay attention to the food? If somebody somebody comes and puts a big cake on the table, my attention network will get split because my amygdala is telling me that look, there's food. So that is all dopamine.
I think this is, it's even heavy for me, honestly, like all this stuff. But,
We can take it a lot slower, actually.
No worries. I love this, bro. I'm sure there are people who, like, especially when I'm challenged on this podcast, it's the biggest stimulation for me. That's my dopamine. But
There you go. Say no to it.
Okay, so let's go back to that moment of killing someone or suicide.
Yeah.
You said that often with people who are dealing with depression or people who are impulsive, the serotonin levels are low.
Yeah.
What is the personality difference in people whose serotonin levels are high or balanced?
Right.
They're more calculated people. They think about everything in their present, which probably means they practice gratitude for everything that's there.
Gratitude is a big part of it, yes. Because you have to be able to have that bandwidth to give value to things. When you say gratitude, when you say, I'm so grateful that I have my family with me, I will only be grateful if I value my family. So if I don't value anything, gratitude is a very hard thing to come across. So when you say that all your neurochemicals are in place and they're well balanced, it means that all these positive virtues are also naturally coming. You cannot say to somebody, be grateful when they are depressed. There is a chemical problem in place that has to be dealt with either through drugs or through therapy, usually through both. Because therapy is also as effective in improving your neurochemical state And drugs are also effective.
So, say if someone is, when we say clinically depressed or, biologically going through some form of anxiety, panic attacks, it's often the case where the serotonin levels are low. Is there a linkage?
Yes. So when you talk of depression, it is not a simple neurochemical being low. Depression is actually a big series of events that happen one after the other
In your brain?
in your brain,
Okay.
where there are actual areas being shrunk.
Okay.
So there is an area called as the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. The name is not as important as the action. This is the area. So when you tap your temple, you're basically tapping that area, and that is the area that is responsible for your actual output, your action. And if that is gone, you are unable to pay attention. You can't focus on things.
You're not motivated.
You are not motivated. And this sets off a chain reaction because your identity is different. You used to identify yourself as somebody who would be a go-getter, who can just, focus on things. I used to study so well in school. Now look at me. It is not really your fault when the parts of your brain that are supposed to do that is not functioning as well. Then it sets off a chain reaction, and then that is what is called as the loop of depression.
And a micro version of this happens to me every 3 months. Again, I'm someone who observes myself. I think it's an outcome of creating these many videos and all that, and also running these many startups. I know I'm a workaholic.
Sure.
What happens to me is every 3 months, I hit like a wall in terms of creativity and hustle.
Like a creative block.
I just stop working, dude.
Wow. Okay.
And I have to go somewhere. I have to go and see Goa, or I have to go and see the mountains, or I have to go and see another part of India or the world. I spend a week or two there, and I'm fine after that. I come back and I'm back to working at maximum pace, maximum creativity. I'm actually in the middle of my peak performance right now. But in those phases where I just can't work, my podcast becomes shittier. My work becomes shittier. I'm not able to write. I'm not able to create.
This is great insight though, that you have that ability to step back and realize that, okay, I'm not going to be functioning at my best right now.
In layman's terms, this is called having systems for your professional life. Know yourself so well that one, you know your strengths and weaknesses, and your weaknesses can be covered by your teammates.
Correct.
Two, know your own personal brain systems. Like, I know 3 months is my mark. Sometimes in a worst case scenario, I can stretch it to 4 or 5 months. And those 4 or 5 months is not peak performance. It's 80% performance. And then the 6th month, I'm dead. Like, if Viraj calls me, I say, I don't want any brand deals. I don't want to do more podcasts. Fortunately, in my peak performance, what I've figured out is, if I'm in this peak, which I am right now, you're my 30th podcast of this month. This 31st, we recorded one before this. So in my peak, I try recording as many podcasts as I can because I know that's my bread and butter. Podcasts are long forms of content. I can cut it up into pieces and supply my Instagram with that, supply everything else with it. But podcasts are my main identity.
So what's your take on burnout?
For me, this is what I just described as burnout, bro.
But it doesn't get worse than this. You are able to stop and get back.
It gets worse. I've struggled with self-doubt in the past, and that was because of my childhood instances. I've spoken about it on the show. My whole life is out there. Self-doubt starts creeping up back into my head. I'll call up my inner circle and say, I don't think I'm capable of doing this. I think I'm just like going to fail in life. It also makes me not just fear the future, but fear the present. Certain levels of imposter syndrome come in terms of once I've reached that 3-month mark or 4-month mark, I start thinking that I've not done anything in life.
Right.
Like, I'm not where I want to be. Which is not true, dude. I am where I want to be. Which a fresh head is now telling you.
Right.
Then I end up like losing my temper. Like, which I'm a pretty stable guy. I have a good control of my anger because of meditation. But it can happen in that 3-month, post that 3-month mark where I tend to get angrier. The other thing that happens is I start like sort of bringing my past traumas to the forefront. Like, there is a breakup, which I'm not over yet. It happened a while ago. Over the girl completely. Not gonna go back. But the trauma of that particular breakup, there's infidelity involved and all that, that keeps coming to the forefront. I go to Goa, I wipe out my head, I get gratitude for life, and I come back to the present moment. I think there are too many joys associated with being single. But sometimes if your brain has a lot of gunk in it, you start highlighting all the small negatives and turning them into like larger negatives than they are.
I had this idea once about how we fall in love with the idea of someone and we are hurt also by the idea of someone.
Zakir Khan had told me this, right? He had said, when I described this particular breakup to him, he said that it sounds like you weren't in love with the girl, but you were in love with the story, which is so true.
Exactly.
So true.
Exactly.
I couldn't have said it better.
Which is also why trauma works in that way, that it's not that girl's picture that is going to trigger stuff. It is random things around it, some situation that reminded you of that story. So it's that idea.
Yeah, 100%. How do I get over the girl? I'm over the girl. How do I get over the breakup from a neuroscience perspective, dude? Because sleep, again, has been helping me a lot. Like, I feel when they say time heals, what they really mean is constant sleep heals from a neurology perspective.
Enough cycles of neuroplasticity heals.
Yeah. Okay, so basically, early on in this episode, I spoke about how self-doubt has been a big thing for me. I've had a very, kind of twisted relationship with my dad when I was a kid. And there was a lot of daddy issues growing up. Now it's sorted. But there's this quote which I'd read when I was a kid, when I was like 11 years old, 12 years old, which had appealed to me a lot. It said that the best cowboys always have daddy issues. Which is so true. Like you see, you see most of these hardcore hustlers nowadays, all of them have began with daddy issues. Girls, guys, whatever. It's basically your dad saying, no, you won't be able to do it in life. Or, your dad saying you'll amount to nothing.
Yeah, in a way, your dad is the representative of the initial rebel that you have to go through.
Yeah.
Because he represents the world.
Yeah.
And what the world should say no to and what the world allows.
Yeah.
So he's like a placeholder. So when you say daddy issues, it boils down to that. It boils down to your earliest relationship with the strict part of the world. And your mom is the comfort part of the world. This is what is traditional. Of course, everybody plays different roles now, but then...
so what issues do you think mommy issues creates?
The idea of what comfort means, what home means, what...
love means.
Love means, what your relationship with your own body means. All of that comes from
Wow, man.
The concept is that there is a biopsychosocial model of identity. Who you are is decided by these three variables. Of course, this is a very old theory, but it still applies for this conversation. The bio part is the genetics. So whatever your genes are, they will play a role. The problem with racism is that they say that genes is all that decides who you are, which is false. Your genes have one part of the say. The second is social. So what your environment decides. So that is started off with your parents and the people in your house, your siblings, your earliest friends, goes on, your college friends, your colleagues, all of them decide who you are. The books that you read. And third is you, your identity, your own free will.
Your own self-talk.
Your own self-talk. So you have 33% of say in who you are, roughly. Of course, you can make it more. You can make it completely you. But there are certain things you cannot escape. You cannot escape your genes. You cannot escape your earliest influences. So your parents will obviously have a huge role.
How do we reach the daddy issues thing?
I think it was always there, Ranveer.
I meant in this conversation, Dr. Sid. But I will take that jibe. But it's nice. I like it. I'll tell you a cool kind of learning I had in the last 3 to 6 months, right? This was in the second wave of COVID where we were all stuck at home. I have friends who, my closest friend group is spread out all across the world, doing incredible things. Someone's saving a forest somewhere, someone's become a Harvard professor, someone's doing something else. One of them who's like probably the most mature of the friend group, he's the wise guy in the friend group, which is not me, okay?
I didn't say anything.
That
That's
dude.
your daddy issue talking.
This dude, his name's Aditya Valvi, we call him Balbi, and he knows me inside out since the age of 10. Okay, like I've literally, he in some ways honestly filled up for the vacuum left by my daddy issues. Like he's that guy for me since the age of 10. And for the entire friend group also, because all of us have daddy issues, just by the way. That's why we're friends.
What a strange coincidence.
But this dude asked me what's up. And about 3 to 6 months back, I was in my most intense startup phase, which actually burnt me out before me going to Goa. And I told him that, dude, I'm just hustling a lot more than I've ever worked. And which is weird because I thought that I'd reached my peak in terms of work output, but I've just gone to some other level. And he's like, so if you go to your core, what would you say is motivating you? And I said, I don't know about it. I don't know whatever. Fucking, I don't have an answer. It used to definitely be my daddy issues up till a point. And in the first lockdown, I sorted out things with my dad. That's a whole other story. I sent him messages saying, sorry, man. Sorry, I haven't spoken to you in a while and all that. Because the first lockdown did certain calming things to me. Changed me as a person. And a part of that whole calm was forgiving my dad, etc., etc. So this dude asked me, what's motivating you? I said, I don't know. Then he said, okay, what else is up in your personal life? And I told him about that breakup, which I just told you about, where I said that, I'm over the girl for sure, but I'm not over the trauma of the breakup. And he's like, hey man, you remember when I just asked you what's motivating you? Do you realize that it's probably the trauma of that breakup that's motivating you? And I said,
Damn.
Didn't think of it that way. And he's like, wait, forget this. Understand the fact that in both your phases of your career, you've used a negative instance in your life to motivate you. So imagine what that says about yourself. And I felt like I was stripped down naked, dude. I was like, oh, that's the game I've made for myself? These false villains?
This idea of I'll show him
or I'll show her. Yeah.
That's the key drive.
And since the last 2 months, 3 months, I've consciously tried to find other forms of motivation. Which I've not been able to articulate or define completely in my head. But I hope that I'm not still motivated by that breakup.
There's a series of books called Conversations with God. And the gist of it is that 2 things drive you, love and fear. In biological terms, dopamine or amygdala. You're either going towards something or you're going away from something. And most of the time, it is fear. If you really think about it, if you want to understand somebody, ask yourself, why did they do that? What are they afraid of? They will always say that they have done it for dopamine. They've done it to achieve something. But what are they running away from? Most of the time, most of what we do, we are running away from something. So we are eating because we are afraid of starvation. We are afraid of death. We want company because we are afraid of loneliness. We want to fall in love because, again, we are afraid of not finding that. Everything is motivated by fear. Once you become consciously aware of it and you try to change your behavior towards, let's not be ruled by fear. Let's be ruled by love. Let's be ruled by wanting to do something. You might do the same things, but it'll change the way you do it. You'll be a little freer.
On this live therapy session, I'm realizing certain things, doctor. When Ronaldo says, your love makes me strong, but your hate makes me unstoppable. It's actually, he's running away from criticism.
Exactly. You need, I mean, in a way, if you are really aware of it and you're smart, nothing wrong in using it. Nothing wrong in using that as a fuel. Fine. Why not? Because I feel that while it's great to be spiritual and enlightened and all that, it's great to have that as an end goal. It's very counterproductive to pretend you are there prematurely.
Yeah, 100%.
You cannot say ki ye sab moh maya hai and then just sit at home and do nothing. The true meaning of ye sab moh maya hai is knowing that your identity is also moh maya. So if you are going to still continue being Ranveer and I have to still continue being Siddharth, I have to play this out. You cannot escape as Siddharth. So if you're going to be Siddharth, play the game.
Wow. Yeah, I'm trying to find what's motivating me right now, dude. And it's probably a cocktail of a couple of things. One,
Like what?
I've consciously taken a lot of financial risk with my startups. I'm very confident in where they're going, but it's requiring a certain amount of my consciousness and energy. And a part of me starting to think that maybe I took those financial risks to create a false sense of fear for my own brain. And probably the second thing is, since we got the Spotify contract, I feel we've gone sort of mainstream. We are on people's phones a lot more, in people's eyes a lot more. And obviously where there is a spike of fame, there is also always a spike of hate. And hate's never affected me since year one. Year one it had affected me. Yeah, for real. Not affected me in terms of, if there was a hate comment, it would literally like bounce off my hand and I would like laugh about it. But the wave of hate that started to come recently, it didn't make me sit down and cry and think that, oh, I'm not capable. It made me go into Ronaldo mode, saying, oh, okay, come. Now just see what I do going forward.
Right.
It kind of made me more aggressive about my own startups.
In your year one, did you get a lot of hate?
Yeah, because you began in fitness, right? Fitness is a very hateful industry, dude.
You're talking of positive body image and all.
All of that, like, oh, you don't have a body, why you like running a fitness channel? Oh, you don't know you're a kid. We've been gymming for 20 years. How do you know? If you say a certain thing that you not just believe about fitness, but I used to back it up with like studies and all that. But if it's against someone's beliefs about fitness, then they just hate. For example, BCAA is not needed. If you prove it by science and research, but if someone's taken BCAAs all their life and spent the savings on BCAAs, they get offended.
Yeah, it's strange how much religion there is in our everyday beliefs.
Oh, everyone has a god, they just call it different names.
Wow. Is that the first time you've said that? Because that
No,
sounds
no,
like a
no.
quote.
No. Heard someone say it, man. So I think someone said it on the podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
That's a beautiful thought. Because God is, again, a placeholder for the set of beliefs that you hold that lets you go through life. Whatever that is. And now we have so many gods. Like, India is a god. Because the concept of the country holds a lot of people together. We are together as a country. Earlier in the tribals, in the jungle, there is nothing. So you create stuff. So God is a placeholder for all the set of beliefs that allow you to navigate through life.
That hate thing,
Yeah.
which we spoke about, that lately that was that Ronaldo zone was happening to me. That okay, I'll show you, and I'll go and achieve what I want. It stopped after Goa.
Damn.
I was just calm after Goa. I was like, oh, you're hating again? Okay, bro. Cool.
That's probably why people say don't get a massage just before entering a boxing ring. You cannot let your muscles relax. If you want to fight, they have to be all tensed up. There is a reason why. Because once your muscles relax, I talked about autonomic nervous system. There is something called as parasympathetic and sympathetic. And this is the basic seesaw. This is the seesaw that all of us run by. It is the yin and yang concept. Parasympathetic is what keeps you down, keeps you calm, keeps your heart rate low, keeps your blood pressure low, your breathing is soft, your skin is normal temperature. Sympathetic is when, if there's a cobra in the room right now, all of us will go into sympathetic. Heart rate shoots up, blood pressure shoots up, your pupils dilate, you want to see more, you are breathing faster, your muscles get tensed up. That is the anxiety level of attention. We are all operating on a hyper-sympathetic level these days. All the time. We are always on the edge. We are always looking at our phones. We are always wondering what is going to happen. Am I late for something? I haven't done that. I haven't done this. We are always on the edge. The more sympathetic overdrive you go into, the more your stress levels are. So I believe that we are in a pandemic of hyper-sympathetic states.
When will this end?
It will end on individual levels. It cannot end as a, sabka. Meditation is a great way. Cold showers are a great way.
Really?
Good sleep is a great way of shifting towards parasympathetic.
Wow.
Deep breathing, sighing, nothing else. Do you know that you will sigh 5 times an hour on average? Just that, what you just did. We don't realize it, but that is a sigh. You're expanding your lungs. You're slightly shifting your sympathetic towards your parasympathetic.
Wow.
You'll feel a little better. What the fuck? You're stressed out. All right, now what? You're a little better. Your autonomic nervous system has shifted. It is all electric, man.
That's crazy, dude. That's why people need to dive deep into neuroscience. There's an insane world out there which is hackable. People assume that they are just the way they are and only therapy can rescue them. Only meditation can rescue them. But the truth is there are a lot of these hacks.
Yeah, it's all connected. Meditation, therapy, they're all connected. And the basis of all of it is neuroscience.
So considering the fact that I have to get lots of views on this podcast, of course we got to make it dark again, doctor.
Go for it.
I didn't have the balls to watch this movie. But I read about a movie called The Father with Anthony Hopkins. And I think you should totally watch it. It's your domain.
Yeah.
It's about Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah.
So the movie is shot from the perspective of the person who's going through Alzheimer's and dementia. So he walks into a room and suddenly it's another timeline. He walks into another room and he sees his daughter, who's very young at that point, but she's actually an adult. He gets whacked by his daughter's fiance because he's frustrated of housing this person in his house.
Yeah.
And in the middle of that guy like troubling him and whacking him, suddenly he wakes up in a hospital where he thinks the nurse is trying to whack him, but she's just trying to feed him food.
Yeah.
Then suddenly at the end of the movie, he cries and says, I want to go back to my mommy.
Yeah.
And this actually happens in the real world. If you've ever had a dementia patient, an Alzheimer's patient in and around you, this happens. What is Alzheimer's and dementia, firstly? And this is sort of a very everyday version of, I hate saying it, but it's a very everyday version of insanity. And then there's also legitimate insanity, which you hear about in Shutter Island, which you hear about in mental asylums.
Psychosis.
So maybe beginning this conversation with Alzheimer's and dementia, could you also take the conversation to overall insanity?
Alzheimer's is a good place to start understanding identity and memory. We don't think about memory too much, but memory is what links each moment to the next. So when I'm making conversation with you, when you tell me something, each word is a separate moment. Like it's like a photograph. I have to put all those photographs together for that sentence to make sense. I'm putting them together because I have memory. If I have no memory, you're just saying random words and there is no connection between them. Similarly, for days and months, all of them will come together to give me a story. In Alzheimer's, the neurons in your brain that are responsible for memory, they die. In simple words, because of chronic stress. And there is something called as accumulation of toxins inside the neurons, and those neurons will die. When those neurons die, your brain loses its ability to make sense of things. It cannot put 2 and 2 together. And so your reality starts to change. We don't think about how you know me. You know my face, you know the story, you know my name. You can put all this together. What if the neurons that connect these 3 things go away and they lose their connection? Now you know my face, but you don't know my name. And you don't know my story. But some other story pops into your mind and you think, wait, maybe this is my brother's friend who's come to borrow money from me.
Or this is my son from 20 years ago.
Correct. He may have a black jacket. That black jacket will trigger that memory and those 2 memories get interlinked. And now suddenly you think that, hey, maybe this is my son. So then there is a confusion. This is what happens in Alzheimer's. Now, along with all this, your amygdala is still active. It is always looking for threats. So you see your daughter. You know the face, but you don't know who that is. Your amygdala is getting activated. Who is this person in my house? She's a stranger. And now you start creating stories to justify it. That maybe my relative is trying to come and kill me. Maybe somebody has hired an assassin to come and put poison into my soup. These are all stories that you create to make sense of this weird picture in front of you. This is what happens in the last stage of Alzheimer's.
So very dark state of
It's a terrible
being, dude.
situation.
Yeah, and again, spiritualism does these things to your own head, especially if you're studying it. You start perceiving the world with a lens of spiritualism. And then I think of things like karma. Could this person have done such bad stuff in this life or the past life that they have to go through this now? This is so much worse than physical injury, where you're being mentally injured every second. Like you're going through trauma every second. And you said that the outcome of chronic stress is Alzheimer's. That means the entire life they've basically been very tense about things. Or they've not had the best state of mind. They've not had the best mental health. And it ends with this.
Yeah. Alzheimer's has multiple reasons. One of them is familial, if there's somebody in your family who has also had it. But the important thing to know is we can delay it by taking care of your mental health, by taking care of your sleep, by taking care of your diet. You can push it further. Not everybody has to go down that road. There are certain things that you can do. I am not a big believer in karma in the way that it is usually spoken of. I believe that we look for reasons because it is important to us. If somebody has an accident, we look for reasons that, maybe they were a bad person, maybe they did something wrong, because that for us completes the story.
It's how the brain's biology also works.
Yeah, we cannot accept that we don't know. So when something happens, we always need to have an explanation. Otherwise, your amygdala is activating. क्यों हो रहा है? So the idea of not knowing is scarier than knowing a wrong answer. So I think that karma is us creating that story. There is, what I do believe in is scientific cause and effect. You spend a whole life sleeping badly, the consequences will be there. So that cause and effect I do believe in. I'm not a fan of spiritual karma. I'm not a believer in spiritual karma.
Yeah, but what if you're like stressed your entire life and that stress causes you to act up in front of people, to act angry with people, and it accumulates in a micro way. You shout at your maid, you shout at your driver. Eventually, when you're old, you have to go through 2 years of Alzheimer's to make up for all those people you've shouted at or looked down upon because of your own stress.
So you're equating that years of shouting and stress with getting Alzheimer's.
Possibly. I'm not saying that that's what it is. But
to say that you got Alzheimer's because you shouted is not scientific. But what chronic stress does is it increases the chances of inflammation. So what is much more likely is getting high blood pressure and getting a stroke, getting a blood clot in your brain, getting a blood clot in your heart, getting a heart attack. All those are actually much more related with chronic stress. So in a way, karma does pay off. You do get something in return for everything that you do. But it is not related to a higher power or anything.
Okay, sure. What about like proper insanity? Like what happens there?
When you, the initial word was madness. This person has gone mad, pagal ho gaya hai. Now you know that there are so many different reasons why somebody can misunderstand the world. What you said, Shutter Island, the example that you'd given, usme that person is unable to understand if he or she is in a prison or is he in a hospital, is somebody there, not there. Another example was Beautiful Mind.
Yeah. Oh my God. About John Nash, the mathematician.
The mathematician. So that was all on schizophrenia. So these are different examples of people's brain being unable to cope with the environment and just creating stories by themselves. In Alzheimer's, that doesn't happen so much. There is no hallucination. Now, the difference in Alzheimer's and schizophrenia is that in schizophrenia, you create things. Even if it's not there, I will imagine somebody standing next to me. Because in my story, it is important that somebody is there. But in Alzheimer's, I will see you and I will change your story.
Schizophrenia, what you explained is the brain starts creating people, maybe characters, maybe ghosts around you. Biologically, again, what's happening?
Auditory and visual hallucinations. That is, you create sounds and you create things that you see. There are areas of the brain. So if you tap the back of your head, that is the occipital lobe. That is where everything visual is coming from.
Which is why your vision becomes blurry if
you hit the back of your head, it can. So everything that you're seeing is going here. But this area of the brain, suppose it starts firing by itself, the images can come either from outside your eyes or it can come from within. Similarly, for sounds, there is an area here in the temporal lobe that is supposed to have the job of understanding outside sounds. It is not supposed to create sounds. What if it starts creating sounds? Then बाहर जो भी चल रहा है, अंदर से ही अगर म्यूजिक बज रहा है, तो then बाहर का फर्क नहीं पड़ता.
Or voices, sounds or voices.
So voices, music, people hear entire conversations, people hear whispers. That somebody is here, somebody's talking. They will see things. Initially, they may start seeing lizards on the wall, random shapes, objects, circles floating somewhere. Then they will start seeing more and more formed, an entire dog, an entire human being. Then they might start seeing entire storylines playing out in front of them. Just depends on how much the brain has lost control over itself. Because all these neurons are actually kept under very strict control. You can just imagine having 1 billion employees in your company. And think of the kind of control you need to make sure that everybody is functioning as per company policy, which is what your prefrontal cortex has to do. Somewhere, if something goes wrong, if some employee goes rogue, you need to have the system in place to make sure that they are found and removed quickly or trained or retrained. all mental health disorders are basically when this system collapses.
How do you treat something like that as a doctor?
It is difficult. So schizophrenia and psychosis, they all come under the field called psychiatry. So as a neurologist, I do not treat them. But the way to do it is roughly into two sections. One is pharmacological. You go in with drugs, you change the levels of the chemicals that we discussed, like serotonin, like dopamine, and you try to bring them back as close to normal as possible. And the other is cognitive behavioral therapy. So you try and use whichever parts of the brain are not damaged, you try and use it to your advantage, and you try to make the brain correct itself.
Like, I'm assuming that's what John Nash did in A Beautiful Mind, because he hallucinated for the rest of his life, but he made peace with his hallucinations.
In a way, yeah. So there are cognitive behavioral therapies for all mental health problems, and you are essentially using the parts of the brain that are okay to treat the parts of the brain that are not. So it's kind of like self-help, but guided.
Bro, there's this whole anti-vaxxers thing going on in the US where people are saying no to vaccines and all that. And I'm all for vaccines. I'm not defending anti-vaxxers at all. My issue is with the polar nature of opinions. Where if you've seen Social Dilemma, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's what's happening, especially in the USA. Like, if we think that India's left wing versus right wing, you should go and see how intense they are. In terms of they are bracketed into two parts of society. And the anti-vaxxers hate like the people who are all for vaccines. The people who are all for vaccines may not even know science in detail, but if someone's an anti-vaxxer, they'll make other assumptions about them. I hear this from my friends who are in the US, how they perceive anti-vaxxers. Anti-vaxxers definitely are idiots for for putting out the idea as much as they do.
Correct.
But I feel even the people who are all for vaccines, when they look down upon all aspects of an anti-vaxxer's mind, are also kind of being
It is, because it is counterproductive. If somebody were to come to me and say they don't believe in vaccines, the point is not to prove my moral superiority over them.
Yeah, that's what it is. Correct.
Right? So we tend to play the short game. Let me ignore you, let me cancel you so that I feel good. But what does that help? We are not winning the game that way. We need to make sure that everybody is educated. The problem is that we equate everybody in the same bracket.
Yeah.
Somebody who says vaccines are going to kill us all, and somebody who says, can you tell me a little bit more about the vaccine because I have some concerns, are both bracketed as an anti-vaxxer. That is very unfair. I feel that the one area where liberal thought is going to lose is because we will club all moderate thinkers also as extreme right. And actually it works both ways now. Or both extremes will reject the center. And whichever one rejects it more strongly will push the center towards the other side.
100%.
Nuance has no place anymore in conversation.
Which is what's happening to myself and a lot of other influencers who are non-aligned. But depending on our content, people assume that we are a part of a certain wing. But
because black and white is very comfortable to the brain. It requires less energy. You don't have to think about nuances. We don't have to think about small areas where I disagree with 30% of what you're saying, but I agree with 70%. This requires you to calculate probability, which requires you to calculate percentages. Much easier to say you're 100% bullshit. Or you're 100% God. So easy, right? It's so clear cut. So then I can go ahead with my life.
The reason I brought up this whole anti-vaxxers versus vaccine aficionados aficionados vibe, it was because now again, I'm asking a doctor this. I'm coming from a place of inquiry and not a place of attack. But is it true that a lot of people who are prescribed antidepressants don't really maybe need the antidepressant? And if that is the case, especially with children who are said, oh, you have ADHD, when it's probably just a very active child. Like I've heard some of my fitness coaches saying this, that one of their kids was a very active kid and they took him to I don't know whether it was a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a neurologist, but that particular professional prescribed intense antidepressants to the kid to calm him down. And eventually that coach put the kid into sports and that kid is flourishing in sports and he's become a calmer kid. So that coach's argument was very antidepressant.
Got it.
But what is the deal with antidepressants? What does it biologically do to your head, and do people really need them?
So antidepressants have saved too many lives now for that argument to be valid anymore. That is it needed or not? The only problem is that with any new technology, you need to know where to draw the line. So just like, say, guns, all right, they were used to fight wars, they were required to maintain peace in an area, but have everybody having guns, probably not a good idea. The risk of something going wrong is definitely there. Similarly, for antidepressants, if somebody is having acute depression, if they are under danger of committing suicide, of course, it is the one thing that will save their lives.
I'm assuming this is related to our previous conversation about serotonin. I'm
Yes.
assuming that the antidepressant does something to your
Yes.
serotonin levels.
So serotonin, a lot of the antidepressants now act on increasing the serotonin levels in the brain.
So that there's a hormonal balance. And
Yes.
therefore, instead of being an impulsive human being, you become a slightly more balanced, calculative human being.
Yes, and you also value things more. You value what you have. That whole gratitude thing that you mentioned also comes with this.
But children, by their nature of being young, are automatically impulsive. You see a fire and you want to put your hand into it to see what is this cute orange thing. And then you realize through experience that, oh, I'm not supposed to do that.
Right.
Now, if you give an antidepressant to a kid who probably just needs maturity, years, experiences, sport.
So we are talking about children who have some psychiatric problem versus children who just have extremes in personality. So this is the difference, that none of us are the same. You cannot point at anybody and say this person is normal. There's no such thing. We all have moments of extreme anger. We all have moments of extreme sadness, and our personalities are all on a spectrum. The problem is that person functional? Are they able to discharge their everyday activities, their duties? If it's a student, can he or she play as other kids? Can he or she study like other kids? And are they able to go ahead in life? If they can't, then it is a pathological problem. Then it is something that we have to intervene. Now, how we intervene depends on how severe that condition is. So, for example, I'll give you an example from neurology. Migraine. A lot of people have migraine. Not every migraine patient requires drugs, because a lot of times the migraines are triggered by sunlight or by stress, by fighting with their husband or wife, or just kids screaming in the house. You identify the trigger, remove the trigger, teach them meditation, teach them importance of proper sleep, and their migraine goes away. It is easier to just prescribe a drug, but not everybody needs it. But if somebody comes to me with acute migraine, they are crying, they have had sleeplessness for 1 week, I will prescribe a medicine, because that's what the medicine is for. But you have to know what to prescribe where. I will definitely say this, that the pharma industry has a big role to play in how decisions are taken by doctors. In the last 50, 100 years, a lot of research has been sponsored by pharma, and a lot of protocols are in place because of the way that research is conducted. That being said, again, this is where the nuance comes in, that if a particular kid has been treated with antidepressants and he or she did not need it, that does not mean that antidepressants are bad. That means that particular case was mishandled.
Yeah, I'd also like to highlight something. We see so many cases of violence against doctors, and people assuming doctors are out there to make money. You're from a family of doctors. I'm from a family of doctors. We know the inside story. All doctors always have good intention with patients. Like when they see someone who's going through something, the first instinct of a doctor is, let me help. Let me see what I can do. What I will say is that what I have observed is that there are agile doctors and doctors which may not be as agile in terms of modern day outlooks on things.
Right.
Like you're a younger doctor. I remember before the camera started rolling, I asked you what you think about ayahuasca and you said, I'm all for it. But maybe an older doctor who's kind of stuck in their ways doesn't look at life that way. And maybe a part of being that stuck, non-agile as you, like you're an agile person. Maybe they're not at your level of agility. in terms of learning, in terms of absorbing new information.
Yeah.
That might cause decisions like that which are not nuanced. Giving a kid who may not actually need antidepressants, depressants. And then that one action kind of paints a bad picture for all doctors in society.
Because it's that whole black and white thing again. All anti-vaxxers are bad, all vaxxers are good. It's again, all kids with ADHD treat them with medicine. So it takes more effort. And doctors are also people. And just like any other group, there will be a spectrum where there will be some people who are more open to taking each person case by case. And there'll be some people who say, migraine hai, treat.
Got it.
Right? So that is definitely there. When we talk of medical health, one thing I would really like to say is that we need to talk about the importance of communication in doctors, because our medical education is primarily focused on drugs. All the way our textbook is written is you talk about the disease, you talk about why it happened, and you talk of the drugs that you can give it. And in the end, there are a couple of paragraphs on diet and sleep. Okay, this helps. How does it help? What does it do? That part isn't covered. So there is a generation of doctors that come out thinking that, of course, we have to give medicines. What else is there? Because that is what we are taught. So I feel that there is a lacunae involved in incorporating holistic medicine into our clinical practice. But that is 100% a change that is going to happen in the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I've seen that all the young doctors I've spoken to, and by young I mean under the age of 45-ish, they have a different thought process as compared to the older doctors. I don't know why that is. I'm assuming it's something in the education.
It is. I feel that we are more open to thinking that let's just save the patient. Let's just help them in whatever way we can. So if I feel that meditation will help somebody, if somebody is taking homeopathy, for example, I personally have no experience in homeopathy. But if somebody is coming to me and saying that they have had benefit, I will never tell them that I don't believe in this. That's not the point. My duty as a doctor is to just make sure that their physical parameters are all okay. Mentally, they are fine. They're not being tricked into anything harmful. And that's it.
Got it. Okay, fine. For the final part of this podcast where we're talking about insanity or, just things going extremely wrong with your brain, what do you think is the first step in that direction? And I'll tell you why I say this. It's because of all these podcasts I've been recording where things are so heavy. You're my 31st podcast of the month, dude, and every conversation has been almost this heavy. Sometimes I feel like I'm going through that situation that therapists go through, where they sometimes absorb the darkness of the person as well. So with this conversation, there's not much darkness other than what we just spoke about in terms of, but there's none of your darkness, as Dr. Sid. I've not asked you about your life. Often I have to ask people who've been tortured, who've gone through things, who've gone through animal attacks, who've gone through all sorts of things. And it ends up leaving me very stimulated post the podcast, but then thoughts stay in my head a day or two after it. Now, there are positive outcomes to podcasting for the podcaster, which is that you're reading a book 30 times in a month.
Correct.
A new, heavy, beautiful book, because the best teachers are other people's life experiences, not just written text. The downside is that sometimes it gets too heavy. And I have been questioning myself about my sanity. In terms of, I'm just thinking so much about so many things.
Empathy is a bitch.
Yeah. And again, I'm not trying to make this what's the word for it? That hero complex, where you think the whole world revolves around you. But I have been feeling that I have been contemplating on what podcasting has been doing to my head. It's definitely making me a very interesting person because I know about multiple topics. But it's making me think way too much. And my friends have told me, dude, you've become a very intense person. It's also part of the reason I can't go back to that girl, because I feel like she won't be able to keep up with this person. But I have become a very intense person in terms of my thoughts.
When the brain decided to evolve and learn, it realized that it cannot go through every experience by itself. So the best way to get better and better is to make sure that you're learning from other people. So if somebody falls into a ditch and breaks their bone, you don't have to break your bone to realize what it feels like. just seeing their face and hearing their cries, and your brain already creates the impression of what that pain is like. This is what empathy is. So we feel like empathy is a very goody-goody, moral, virtuous thing, but it is actually a very sensible, efficient way for your brain to learn. So when you're doing podcasts and you're listening to us, you, as an empathetic person, you are absorbing everything. But we cannot absorb things and keep them at a distance at the same time. So if you absorb a story of trauma, it is going to be traumatic because you are empathetic. So you take it in, visualize it, feel it, and that is how you learn. So that is the downside. Everything has a downside, and every negative thing has an upside. So the downside of empathy is that there's something called as trauma dumping. I don't know if you've heard this term. It means if I'm coming to you and I'm sitting and you're like, hey, tell me how you are. And I just start telling you that, man, my girlfriend left me. I was in an abusive relationship. This was going on for the last 1 month. I'm in so much pain. Maybe you are not in a mental state to hear all that. So I have to take consent from you first. Like, bro, are you in a position to listen to all my trauma? But as a podcaster, you have left yourself open. You have actually left yourself vulnerable to everybody's life stories.
I also feel the difference between the listener's experience and the podcaster's experiences.
Yeah.
I have to do 30 episodes in a month. You guys have to listen to 30 episodes over 15 weeks.
Right.
So you get time off the podcast also. You do other shit in the day.
Yeah.
You spend time with your family. I'm just doing this, which makes me really smart and it gives me unlimited content, but also fucks me up.
How do you when you go to sleep at night, does the conversation play back?
There's something called yoga nidra. It's called relaxation techniques, which Huberman speaks about actually. Relaxation techniques have saved my ass.
So what do you do?
It's a elaborate breathing, sort of it's half pranayam, half tightening your muscles and relaxing them in a certain pattern, which is technical. Now what that effectively does is it flushes your mind and your body of your daily thoughts and emotions. The spiritual angle is that you turn your attention towards God or the universe or light or goodness, whatever you want to call it.
Away from your body.
Yeah. So the spiritual school I'm from talks about the human body like sort of a light bulb. And in the same way that we talk about electricity and chemicals flowing through your nervous system, even that electricity and those chemicals flowing through your nervous system are made up of something. What are the building blocks for that?
Right.
So spirituality calls that cosmic energy. So they compare the human body to a light bulb. And they say that if I'm playing football, there's a lot of electricity going through that light bulb. If I'm giving an exam, a lot of electricity going through that light bulb. If I'm doing this, a lot of electricity going through that light bulb. If I'm just having a casual conversation, a little less.
The light is dim.
Yeah. If I am sleeping, but my head is heavy with thoughts, I have an exam the next day. I am thinking a lot about something happening in my family life. Some relative is unwell. It's not like the entire electricity leaves the light bulb. You go to sleep with a light bulb that's half on. When you meditate and you reach a very deep level of calm, even then, your entire light is not off. There is a small part of your light that's on.
Yeah.
But when we hear of things like, have you heard of samadhi in meditation, where they say your soul leaves the body?
Yeah.
That's where the electricity leaves the light bulb
extinguished.
completely, but you're not dead.
Right.
The electricity can come back. And then that's higher forms of yoga and meditation. That's what we work towards in spiritualism. That we try getting to higher degrees of meditation. But can I reach that state of calm? Can I go into that state of transcendence? That's what it's called. Now, what relaxation techniques do is that it helps your brain polish up the process of flushing out. You're not emptying all the electricity from the light bulb, but what you're doing is you're flushing out a lot of it, which improves the process of flushing it out for your long-term future. So you're working the muscle of flushing out the electricity every time relaxing. And the short-term version of this is you forget a lot of the traumas you absorbed in the day. So every night, I'll go to sleep thinking of God purely because of the relaxation techniques.
Right.
And I'm able to take all that electricity and just focus it on God, focus it on the universe.
Beautiful. And it gets easier, I'm guessing. Like every day.
It depends on what's happening in your work life, your habits, your meditation, a lot of things, man. But it's a healthy practice to have, and yoga nidra is the kind of mainstream spoken about version of relaxation techniques.
Right.
That's what it is, mister. Yeah, it's thought fodder, dude. So I've not been meditating as much as I'd like for the last 6 months because I've just been in a deep startup zone. And that's honestly a big reason I've been feeling not in the best mental shape. I have been feeling okay lately, but maybe before Goa and all, I was wrecked, man. Like I legit thought I was becoming insane.
Wow.
And it's definitely the burnout creating voices in your head.
Are you still undergoing therapy or?
Not really. But after the vacation and after talking to my inner circle, I also have one spiritual mentor who I speak to, this beautiful lady who's helped me a lot. I count that as therapy because she asked me the right questions again. And she's a doctor. So she comes from a place of science, but she asks me the right spiritual questions. I think if I was burnt out right now, and I'm not at all burnt out, I'm in like full Josh. But if I was burnt out by the end of this month, it is what, September? We're in September?
Yeah.
So from August 15th to about September 15th, I've recorded 31, 32 podcasts almost. And in a bad state of mind, I would have thought I'm going crazy. Just because of Hans Dalal, who's lived in the jungle for 12 years alone. He's told me about f***ing a tiger this up close and personal. Someone else who's f***ing kidnapped by pirates. Someone else who's been a colonel during the Kargil war and seen his men die. So someone else who has, become a Shaolin warrior monk, but all the practice he had to put himself through to become that warrior.
Right.
So just too many angles, and I know, at least I believe the system for me here is switching off from podcasting for some time. So next month, October 15th onwards, till probably December, I'm taking an off. And right now I've stocked up till the end of November, and I anticipate December also will get done.
Yeah. Because stories take a toll. Even just watching movies one after the other.
Oh, fuck, yeah.
That has the same effect.
Yeah.
And I've seen your podcast, and all the guests are very visual in the way they present their stories. So it is literally like you are watching intense movies every day.
Yeah, dude. Which has kind of made me look for content that's not movies and that's not YouTube, which has turned into my love for sports, which has reignited. Just so much novelty in sports, dude. It's so different from.
How
this
excited are you for Ronaldo to be back
God,
in Man U?
God, bro. Like, it's like you're seeing your childhood hero, dude.
Absolutely.
He's a huge reason I work hard, like myself, So reading about him, seeing his interviews since the time I'm fucking 9 years old.
Yeah. I fell in love with Man U when we had the trifecta going of Rooney, Tevez and Ronaldo.
Yeah, 100%.
That's when I started.
Yeah, and all three were really hardworking players, man.
Right.
That's what we don't understand about sports at this stage with all these startups going on. There's definitely multiple skill sets that come into play to grow businesses and to take your career ahead. A very underrated and underappreciated aspect of growth in life is your experiences you had when you were a kid, especially the positive experiences, which have created certain thought processes. All my co-founders have grown up watching football, cricket, basketball. And that's why they have a sense of teamwork. They have a sense of humility. They have a sense of hard work. They have a sense of creativity sometimes. That take that risk sometimes. Throw that through ball that may not hit your teammate. Yeah. And that's the real kind of edge I feel even Monk Entertainment has, BeerBiceps has. We try growing with people who've either played sports or watched sports. And I've also seen the flip side where if we have worked with someone who's not played sports and not watched sports, we have to put them through a certain extra level of education and tell them, this is what teamwork is.
Because the metaphors don't work as well.
Exactly.
When you say that, I see a through pass here. Somebody who's not played football will not know what that means.
Yeah.
It's very interesting how metaphors actually define your thinking. It's not just to communicate with somebody else.
It's also for identity.
So when you talk to a chess player, they will talk about their everyday life from the concept of a chessboard. That I made my move. This looks like a bad position. I'll sacrifice this for now, but then later on I'll have compensation. The way that life arranges itself, you can arrange your life in any way. It is free for all. You think that this has a structure, but your brain has created the structure. You can create the structure into anything. You can turn it into anything. Somebody who's a pool player will see everything as color and pockets to put it into, and angles and balls. So a football player will see everything in terms of, okay, let's arrange ourselves this way. Let's pass on.
Yeah, that's what's been happening. Bro, football saved me from like a very dark place in my life
Yeah.
multiple times, playing football and watching.
Yeah.
Watching as a teenager, it picked you out of the teenage darkness.
Yeah.
Playing as an adult, where it lets you be a kid again. It lets you look at life and work in a certain way.
And lets you forget.
It is a form of meditation, right? Because you're kind of putting your consciousness into that one field.
One thing, one ball.
Dude, sports is a game changer as an adult. That's what more adults need to understand. Kids know. Adults need to discover one sport.
Yeah. Kids know, but adults appreciate when they are playing. Because you don't, you could be in the worst mindset when you start playing, but then you are basically substituting all the stressors of your life into stressors on the field.
Yeah.
And somehow stressors on the field are more easily dealt with. You can run past a stressor.
Yeah.
You can score against a stressor.
And at its core, all these intense problems of the mind that we spoke about going forward, so much of it can be fixed with a good lifestyle, a clean sense of being, a clean sense of living, sports, healthy eating, healthy content.
Yeah.
All these things add up in the long term, man. And
I want to ask you something.
sure.
How much do you think the idea of finances in your everyday conversation, in your thinking, the minute you talk of finances, does it come in the way of artistic thought, or does it boost artistic thought?
There was a big phase in my life because of the person I was dating at that time and the people around me and my own childhood where I used to perceive money as money. Okay? Where if you're be getting paid 10,000 rupees for something, your perception of it is a massive stack of coins that's coming your way and you can get to keep it. Right? The visualization and perception of money changed eventually in life, again because of spirituality, which highlights money as just energy. Money is a return of energy to your life. Why are you getting paid as a YouTuber? I've sustained my career for 6 years when people fade away in 1 or 2. And that's because the core of my content has always been put out as much value as you can. If I want, I can just talk about bullshit to you and put it out in a podcast. But I talk about something that people will be able to take away because that's a form of putting value. I'm not getting paid for this podcast in any form other than the Spotify contract. But I know that long term, the value I'm putting out will come back as money. And this is a cycle I've seen always. So when I got into that habit of making money, especially when we were beginning to make big money in life, I got into this habit of hoarding money. And eventually spirituality helped me realize that money is a bounce back of value and you got to keep energy flowing. So if you're making money, you also got to say, okay, here's this money. Let's flow some into my savings and my portfolio. And let's make the rest of it flow into making more money. Let it flow into other people's lives. Even the value you put into your team's life is going to come back. If you've helped someone kind of elevate their lifestyle or their family's life, blessings, value is going to come back to you. And the more you give, as long as you're working hard, I feel like the more you get. I had a vision once on a very deep meditation way back, which flipped things for me. So I was bootstrapping. This is like even before Viraj came into my life. It was just Rajas, my first team member. And I had to give him a raise at a certain point. But giving him a raise was very crucial for me to retain him as a team member. And at the same time, I really wanted to give him a raise, but I had to unlearn this thing of hoarding money. Okay? Or thinking that, no, I'll need this money for the future for a rough time. And I got a vision in my meditation that God or light came to me and said that the more you give to the people behind you, the more I'll give you in order to support more people behind you. So switch this. And that was a seed of thought behind later reading about the spiritual aspect of money. So I ended up giving him a raise, and at the same time, we got 3 brand deals samne se. And I was like, what the fuck is happening here? The next week, we got 3 brand deals. And this is when we didn't get brand deals all the time. And it's just been a cycle of that. If someone's performing, giving me their all, and I have team chemistry with them, they'll get paid. But the long-term vision is that we need to build generational wealth for like an entire team. Which is only going to get built if we're all very in it. Which is going to get built through the football players of the world. Teamwork, hard work, all that. It'll come, man. Like, this is also how I overcame my self-doubt. I'm sorry I'm making this about me, but I'm just
No, I wanted to.
I overcame self-doubt by point A to point B to point C mentalities where if you've reached point B in terms of material growth, success, fame, money, and you think you're not going to get to point C, just know that it's taken you a certain mind chemistry and physical chemistry to get from even A to B. And you have that mind chemistry and physical chemistry inside you. So you'll be able to get to C and D and Z.
Yeah. I've been thinking of how everything is give and take, in and out. That flow of to and fro cannot be escaped. It holds true for the most basic of things, starting from your breathing. You can't hold your breath. You'll die. You have to exhale and then you have to inhale again, exhale again. Eating is the same thing. It is a cycle of energy intake and output. To build your muscles, you have to spend energy, get energy, spend energy, get energy. Every time you talk of growth, you are actually talking of intake and output. So our thinking when it comes to money, when it comes to friends, when it comes to content, even when it comes to ideas. When I was a kid, I used to write poetry. And when I got a good idea, I would think, let me keep this idea for another day, when I would think of when I can convert it into something much better. Let's not waste that idea on a small poem somewhere. But then I realized that if you don't use it right then and there, you're not going to get better ideas later. So whatever you want to do, do it. Put stuff out into the universe for you to get more. Because that nothing is worse than clutter.
Why are you doing what you're doing now, dude? Maybe the same mentality of writing poetry as a kid, like you were expressing your creativity in poems, now you're expressing your creativity through your content.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there have been other doctors in the past who've seen content creators and thought, I can do this because I have content in my head. There's not too many who actually did it.
Yeah.
So your impulsiveness and your execution did it. But why are you doing what you're doing?
For the simple reason that I have stuff to say. And I feel that whatever you have to say should be said. Now, this is true for a global stage for content creation. It's also true for your relationships. It's true for your friendships. If you have something to say it. If you have something to express it, because that is how you grow. You think that expressing it is for somebody else is good, but it's not. You're doing it for yourself. If I don't say all this, how do I get the next set of thoughts? Because we are not done. I don't know everything. But whatever I do know, if I don't teach, I will not learn. Simple as that.
You know, man, because I have two parts of my life, just like yourself. You have your medicine and you have your content creation. I have startups and I have content creation.
Yeah.
Okay. And my week is pretty much divided now into, okay, this is the day for startups, this is the day for content creation. Saturdays are always for startups. And if Viraj brings some content creation work or my team brings some content creation work, I don't like it. And they know I don't like it. Because it changes up my day. Today's a Saturday when we're recording this and we're creating content. I woke up in the morning with excitement because I was getting to talk to you. I was like, fuck this shit today. Fuck these schedules. Not gonna do startup work. I'm gonna learn today and create content.
Brilliant.
So I'm damn grateful that you came in today, dude. Like after a very long time, I've been this excited about guests. All the guests we've had lately are incredible.
Yeah.
But today excited me, man. And this is just the second recording we're doing. So I'm looking forward to see the next 20 million ones we do. Thanks
Same
for
here,
being
man.
on the show, bro.
Thank you for having me.
We'll move on to the next one.
Done.
That was the super heavy episode for you guys today. With this particular episode, we even contemplated splitting it up into 2 episodes rather than just throwing this heavy atom bomb of knowledge at the audience. I'd actually love to know from you guys. Tell me in the comments, tell me on our social media handles. Do you guys like 45-minute-ish episodes, or should we keep the podcast this long and juicy? Let us know, because from an algorithmic perspective, shorter episodes always do better. But it's the longer episodes where you find the real meat, the real diamonds, the real wisdom. Remember to follow the Ranveer Show on Spotify. Every episode's available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. And now that you've listened to this podcast to this point, probably says that you're really into my content. Thank you, firstly. Secondly, this was an unasked for sort of self-therapy session from me. Dr. Sid Warrier is a neurologist. He's not a psychiatrist. He's not a psychologist. But he knows so much about the human mind's hardware that he ends up knowing a lot about the software. So this particular conversation actually helped me heal a lot of things inside me, because that's what therapy is, right? You listen to your therapist, you apply the things that they say, You get to know yourself even deeper. You get to know how your mind works. And then wherever you can mold it into a more positive version of itself, you try doing that. That's why this episode will always be very special to me. It helped heal me through the medium of science. And I hope you enjoyed this very deep, very heart-to-heart conversation of the Ranveer Show.